The Bible names them. They are called the Nephilim. And if you read the text carefully, not the Sunday school version, the actual Hebrew text, they are the offspring of angelic beings who came down from heaven and had children with human women. This is not mythology. This is not metaphor. The word is in your Bible, in Genesis chapter 6, in Numbers chapter 13, and it is mentioned in the New Testament. The question is not whether the Nephilim existed. The question is, what were they, and why did their existence require a worldwide flood to end it? In this video, we are going to trace the Nephilim from their first mention in Genesis through the Dead Sea Scrolls, through the Book of Enoch, and into the New Testament. By the end, you will understand exactly what they were, who their fathers were, and why the Bible treats them as the central reason God decided to reset humanity entirely. Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4. As mankind began to multiply on the face of the earth, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. 4 verses. No explanation, no context, just a statement, as if the reader already knows what this means. The sons of God came to the daughters of men, and what was born was the Nephilim. The Hebrew word is Nephilim. Most scholars trace it to the root nephil, to fall. The Nephilim are, in the most literal sense, the fallen ones, or depending on how you read the causative form, those who cause others to fall. Either way, the name carries a verdict. These were not neutral beings. They were, from the moment of their naming, marked by the same word used throughout the Old Testament for collapse, ruin, and descent into violence. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible used by Jesus and his disciples, translates it as gigantes, giants. Who were the sons of God? This is the question that split Jewish and Christian scholars for 2,000 years. 3 interpretations exist. The first and oldest, they were angelic beings. The same Hebrew phrase, B'nai Elohim, is used in Job chapters 1 and 2, unambiguously referring to heavenly beings in God's divine counsel. The second interpretation developed in the early church. They were the godly line of Seth, intermarrying with the corrupt line of Cain. The third, much later, they were ancient kings or rulers claiming divine status. The oldest sources, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, Jude, and 2 Peter, all use the first interpretation, angelic beings, specifically the Watchers. The Book of Enoch fills in what Genesis leaves out. It gives the Watchers names. It identifies their leader, Semyaza. It records their oath. 200 of them gathered on the summit of Mount Hermon and swore together that they would descend and take wives from among humanity, knowing it was forbidden. The Book of Enoch was not considered fringe theology. It was copied more times than almost any other text in the Dead Sea Scrolls library. The writer of Jude quotes it by name, and it answers the one question Genesis refuses to answer: who were the sons of God? Mount Hermon sits on the border of modern Lebanon and Syria. It rises to nearly 3,000 meters. In the Book of Enoch, it is identified as the precise location where the Watchers descended. The name Hermon itself comes from the Hebrew Sherem, meaning ban, or thing set apart for destruction. The mountain is named for what happened on it. The oath the Watchers swore on its summit was an act that placed them under the ancient curse of Sherem. They could not be redeemed. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. and what followed came from that crossing. The offspring of the Watchers and human women were not merely large. The Book of Enoch records their size in figures that exceed what the earth was designed to hold. Even at a fraction of what the text describes, they dwarfed ordinary men entirely. But size was not the primary problem. The Nephilim consumed everything. First the food, then the animals, then human beings. Enoch records it in sequence, as if describing a system collapsing under a weight it was never designed to carry. These were beings whose existence exceeded what the earth could sustain. Genesis 6, verse 5, God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And in verse 11, the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. The word translated violence, shamas, appears in the Old Testament almost exclusively in contexts of wrongful, destructive force. This was not ordinary human sinfulness. The Nephilim had corrupted the earth itself. The knowledge the Watchers had taught, metallurgy, sorcery, the arts of war, had spread, and the result was a world that could not be reformed, only reset. The Nephilim do not disappear after the flood. Numbers chapter 13 records the 12 spies sent by Moses into Canaan. 10 of them return with a devastating report. They saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who came from the Nephilim, and they say this, "We seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them." The Anakim, the descendants of Anak, they are encountered again throughout Joshua, Judges, and Samuel. Goliath of Gath was from a line of Rephaim, another term for post-flood giants. The Nephilim were not extinct. They had simply been reduced, and they had settled in Canaan, in the land God was sending Israel to possess. Goliath stands 6 cubits and a span, roughly 9 feet 9 inches by standard cubit measurements. His brothers are described as men of great stature. The Rephaim appear throughout the conquest of Canaan as the existing inhabitants of specific territories. King Og of Bashan, whose iron bedstead was 13 feet long, is described as the last of the Rephaim. These were not isolated individuals. They were the remnant of a line that had survived the flood, reduced in size and number, but still present in the land that Israel was commanded to clear. The giant did not appear from nowhere. He came from a lineage, and that lineage traces back to Mount Hermon. The flood in this reading was not primarily about human wickedness in the abstract. It was about a specific contamination, a crossing of boundaries between the divine and the human that had produced something that could not coexist with what God had made. The Book of Enoch is explicit. God's judgment fell first on the Watchers. They were bound. Their children, the Nephilim, would destroy each other. The earth would be cleansed by water. And Enoch, the one man who had remained uncontaminated, was taken, preserved, before the reset came. The flood was not random destruction. It was surgical removal of a corruption that had gone all the way down. The New Testament does not treat the Watcher story as mythology. Jude, verse 6, the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. Tartarus, the deepest level of the underworld in Greek cosmology. Peter uses a Greek word that his readers would immediately recognize as the place of punishment for beings who violated divine order by crossing into the human realm. The watchers are in chains, awaiting judgment. This is not folklore. This is New Testament theology. Here is what changes when you understand the Nephilim. The flood is not a children's story about a man and a boat and animals. It is the account of God responding to a specific act of cosmic rebellion, the unauthorized merging of divine and human, that produced something so violent and consuming that the only solution was to start again. The conquest of Canaan is not what it appears on the surface. It is the removal of the post-flood remnant of that same contaminated line from the land where God's people would be established. The Book of Enoch is not fringe literature. It is the background document that makes Genesis 6 and Numbers 13 and the New Testament letters about fallen angels coherent. Without it, you have fragments. With it, you have a story. Next episode, we go inside the Book of Enoch itself. We follow the Watchers by name. We trace their descent on Mount Hermon, the oath they swore, the knowledge they gave to humanity, and the judgment that came for each one of them. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. This is Enoch Unveiled, and we are just getting started.